And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 2 of the Pyro podcast. Today on the Pyro podcast, we're going to be doing a little debate review, since that's under the purview of Pyro. And the specific debate we're starting with is Sam Harris's recent upload from 2 days ago, entitled, "What if Consciousness is Fundamental? A Conversation with Annika Harris," which is absolutely hilarious because that's his wife who knows everything about everything better than Sam, but he doesn't view her as his intellectual equal, you see. One of the most tragic things of all time. Now, there's a couple things I noticed right off the bat. First of all, it's available in its entirety, which I don't know is due to her or YouTube, but certainly probably not due to him. And, since he paywalls the shit out of all his shit these days. And let's see here. The the thumbnail has a nice little blown up picture of a universe and the very beautiful picture of the cover of his wife's book called Lights On: How Understanding Consciousness Helps Us Understand the Universe by Annika Harris. AKA, she's preaching my understanding of God, and she's clearly been doing so for a long, long time. She's teaching the objective truth about God, and her husband, that worthless man, doesn't even believe in free will. So let's go, shall we? Hi, Bentley. It's good to have you.
I'm nervous.
Don't be.
Actually, I have a cute story to
We've
tell
only
about
been
that.
married for 20 plus years, so it takes a while to get comfortable.
I have
a
a
story?
cute violent story
Oh,
that
all right.
you might want to hear.
Let's
This
hear
is
it.
so cringe.
Okay, well,
I'm doing well,
I
thank you,
was
Bentley.
driving the kids to school this morning. I was feeling nervous about doing this, and I said to Violet, I'm nervous about my interview with Daddy today. I said, do you have any advice? And she said, well, I don't know what you do in interviews. How could I give you advice for an interview? And I said, yeah, but you know me. Like, could you give me advice?
Hello, cat lady.
Because I feel nervous. And she said, well, don't cry.
Funny. Well,
I'll try not to cry.
This is fucked up. I
Well,
hate
feel
him.
free to cry. Okay, well, you have an amazing audiobook series. It's an audio documentary, but it's being framed as an audiobook. It's available on
That's
Audible
cute, Joshua.
and elsewhere, which just dropped this week. Normally we would have recorded this earlier, but I've been sick for 10 days. But now we're free to talk about the contents of what you've done here, and we're also going to release one of the chapters on the podcast and on Waking Up. That's about 11 hours of content for the whole series. Mm-hmm. And you did how many interviews of scientists for this? How many hours of?
I did about 35, but I believe 15 made it into the documentary.
Right. So
I could be wrong about those numbers, but about 35.
Everyone who cares about intellectual anything, immediately go and listen to the entire thing that Annika released, okay? It's almost certainly the best shit of all time.
15.
So you had something like 60 or 70 hours of content?
Yeah, at least more. Yeah.
And you spoke to some fascinating people. Who did you
Amen, John Adams.
speak with?
Amen.
I talked to physicists.
Make America great again.
Like Brian Greene and Jan Levin and Adam Frank, Sean Carroll, and then I spoke to many neuroscientists on Seth and David Eagleman and others. I think the list is actually 18. I spoke to people who specialize in consciousness, like Sue Blackmore, Christoph Koch. Yeah, the list was long.
And the whole thing is organized around a single question, really, which is, what if
her consciousness is so stunted and toxified by his disrespect of her intellectually, and I hate him for it.
Consciousness is fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, it started with David Eagleman, and others. I think the list is actually.
And the whole thing is organized around a single question, really, which is what if consciousness is fundamental?
Yeah, it is. It started with a less extreme question. I think the first question I went into it with for the course of years of having these conversations, that if it does go deeper than we have assumed, and much deeper than we have assumed, then I have an argument that it has to really go all the way down. And so then, yes, the question became,
Good
is
girl.
consciousness
You concluded that yes, in fact, it is.
I have an argument that it has to really go all the way down. And so,
But since you're still afraid of your husband, I doubt that you would articulate it so clearly. But maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
and yes, the question became, is consciousness fundamental?
So we might want to review the starting point here, which is inevitably the hard problem, as David Chalmers described it. We've talked about this before. I've talked about it many times, and you cover it in depth in your book, Conscious, and you also start the series. It's a difficult intellectual problem to situate consciousness in the order of things.
Yeah, it's a problem I didn't get for a long time, actually. But really what it comes down to is the way in which consciousness, and by consciousness I mean in the most fundamental sense, the fact that there is something that it's like, the fact that there's any felt experience, internal felt experience at all to any system, really. And the question is, because consciousness is different from everything else we study in science, and that it can never be directly observed from the outside. You can communicate a lot about conscious experience.
We have faith that we're conscious, you see, but it's also a scientific fact, you see, because all matter is conscious, you see. And therefore the universe is God, and we are simply its fingers and its hair follicles, you see.
So we can talk about them, we can talk about how we is different from everything else. We communicate a lot about conscious experiences, we can talk about them, we can talk about how we think they're generated, but to actually, know my experience right now of looking at a brown wood table, nowhere else from the universe that direct experience can be talked about or felt except from the exquisite. How some non-conscious matter gets configured in a way that suddenly there's this other property of there being something that it's like to be that matter.
It's a completely irrational thing to think. It's much less likely than the alternative, which is that all things are conscious, you see. And therefore the universe is conscious. And since boundaries are imaginary, we're all just part of the same single organism known as the universe. And another good word for that would be God, as they patiently tried to explain in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
What do we mean by consciousness?
Conscious matter gets configured in a way that suddenly there's this other property of there being something that it's like to be that matter.
Which is what we mean.
All right, that's enough for now. I shall continue with their discussion of this in episode 3. Thank you very much. God bless you. I love you, and have a nice day.